For 3 centuries, sailors in every ocean described the same creature. Vast enough to be mistaken for a coastline, it rose without warning and pulled entire ships below the surface. They called it the Kraken, and every mariner alive feared it. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. There is a particular kind of fear that only the open ocean produces. You are days from any coast. The water beneath your hull is 2 miles deep. You cannot see the bottom. You cannot know what lies there. Every sailor who ever crossed the Atlantic or navigated the Norwegian Sea understood this fear at a physical level, not as an abstract concern, but as a daily companion. The Kraken was born from that fear, but it was not born solely from imagination. The sailors who described it were not fools, and they were not liars. They were experienced men who had spent years at sea, who could read weather and current and the behavior of ocean creatures with a precision that landsmen could not approach. When they described something enormous rising from the deep, circling their vessels, dragging ships under with its arms, they were describing something they believed they had seen. The question that took centuries to answer was whether that something was real. The name itself is Norwegian, derived from the Old Norse word for something twisted, crooked, or uneasy. The Kraken appears in Norwegian maritime tradition as far back as written records go in that culture. The earliest formal descriptions come from the 1200s, when Icelandic texts referred to a massive sea creature called the Hafgufa, which translates roughly to sea mist or sea haze, a name that itself suggests something that appeared and disappeared like weather, vast and nebulous and not quite solid. It was described as so large that it was sometimes mistaken for an island by sailors who anchored near it, only to find their island was alive. This specific detail, the creature mistaken for an island, appears across an extraordinary range of cultures and centuries. Arab sailors wrote of a creature called the Zaratan. The 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries were the golden age of European maritime expansion and also the golden age of documented sea monster encounters. As more ships ventured further from familiar coastlines into genuinely open ocean, the volume of reported encounters with enormous unknown creatures rose dramatically. This is sometimes presented as evidence that the encounters were fictional, the product of sailor superstition amplified by isolation and fear. But there is another way to read it. As ships moved into the open Atlantic, the Pacific, and the deep waters of the Norwegian and Greenland seas, they were genuinely entering the territory of large cephalopods, giant squid, and their relatives, creatures that had existed in those waters for millions of years, but that European sailors had never encountered in their usual coastal routes. The Scandinavian tradition produced the most detailed early accounts. Bishop Erik Pontoppidan of Bergen published his Natural History of Norway in 1752, and his description of the Kraken is among the most precise and influential ever written. Pontoppidan was a churchman and an educated man who was deeply skeptical of superstition. He interviewed fishermen and sailors systematically, cross-referencing their accounts, identifying consistencies, and discarding obvious exaggerations. What he arrived at was a description of an animal of extraordinary size, perhaps 1.5 miles in circumference, that floated near the surface in the deep waters off Norway, attracted fish above it in such numbers that the fishing was remarkably good around it, and then occasionally dove, creating a whirlpool that could endanger any vessel caught above it. The Kraken was not merely a legend of Norwegian fishermen and Enlightenment naturalists. It was a living presence in the culture of the men who sailed the Caribbean, the Atlantic seaways, and the routes between Europe and the Americas during the golden age of piracy, roughly the 1680s through the 1730s. Pirates were not ignorant men. Many of them were experienced sailors who had served in legitimate navies or merchant fleets before turning to piracy. And some of the most successful pirate captains were genuinely learned individuals with detailed knowledge of navigation, astronomy, weather, and the natural world of the ocean. They operated in waters that were, in terms of deep ocean biology, almost completely unknown. The Caribbean waters above the Puerto Rico Trench, which reaches depths of over 8,000 meters, are home to one of the most biologically diverse marine environments on the planet. The deep water off the coast of Hispaniola, where pirates operated extensively, sits above an abyssal plain that has never been fully explored. The routes between the Caribbean and the African coast, which pirates used for the slave trade when they engaged in it and for raiding slave ships when they did not, crossed open Atlantic waters above the mid-Atlantic ridge, where deep water circulation brings cold, nutrient-rich water to the surface and supports enormous populations of large marine animals. Pirate accounts of enormous sea creatures in these waters are scattered through the historical record, though they receive almost no academic attention because pirates did not write formal natural histories, and their accounts are embedded in sources that historians have not typically mined for zoological information. One of the most persistent elements of Kraken mythology is the image of arms reaching above the level of the ship's deck, wrapping around masts and rigging, pulling the vessel sideways in the water. This image is dramatic enough to seem purely fantastic, but it has a biological basis that becomes clear once you understand the actual dimensions and behavior of the largest cephalopods. The colossal squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, is the largest invertebrate on Earth by mass. Full adults can reach lengths of around 12 to 14 meters, including tentacles, with mantles alone reaching 2 meters or more. The giant squid, Architeuthis ducks, can reach even greater total lengths, with some specimens showing tentacles extending to over 13 meters from the tip to the tail. These animals have the largest eyes of any creature on Earth, eyes that can be 30 centimeters across, specifically adapted to detecting the faint bioluminescent flickers of prey and predators in near-total darkness. Giant squid live primarily at depth between 200 and 1,000 meters below the surface, but they come to shallower water under specific conditions. Sick or dying individuals frequently surface. Individuals disoriented by underwater noise or seismic activity have been found at the surface. During certain seasons, particularly in cold northern waters, feeding aggregations have been documented in relatively shallow water. And most significantly for the purposes of historical encounters, giant squid appear at the surface with some regularity in the deep waters around the Norwegian Sea, the Azores, and the waters west of the Iberian Peninsula, precisely the areas where the most credible historical Kraken encounters were documented. Pontoppidan's description of the Kraken diving and creating a whirlpool dangerous to ships above it has been treated as the most obviously fantastic element of the legend. Whirlpools that can sink ships created by a diving animal seem physically absurd, but the whirlpool element of the Kraken legend has a more nuanced origin than simple invention. Large diving marine animals do create significant water disturbance. A sperm whale sounding from near the surface creates visible turbulence across a wide area. A group of large cephalopods descending simultaneously from near the surface into deeper water would create observable water movement. In shallow coastal water, this kind of disturbance from a large mass of animals could be significant. But in the open ocean, it would not create a whirlpool capable of endangering a ship. What it could do, and this is the element that the Kraken legend may have absorbed from actual observation, is create visible circular water motion, a boiling or churning area on the surface that sailors unfamiliar with the behavior of large marine aggregations would not have a ready explanation for. Add to this the genuine and documented phenomenon of the maelstrom, the tidal whirlpool off the Norwegian coast that is real, dangerous, and which Pontoppidan himself wrote about in the same volume as the Kraken. And you have a context in which the association between large, unknown sea creatures and dangerous water movement becomes understandable as a fusion of real observations rather than pure invention. The Saltstraumen, near Bodø in Norway, is the strongest tidal current in the world. The Moskstraumen, the maelstrom of Norwegian legend, is dangerous enough to have sunk vessels in historical times. In 1735, the Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus published the first edition of his Systema Naturae, the foundational document of modern biological taxonomy. In early editions, Linnaeus included the Kraken in his classification system under the vermes, the category then used for invertebrates, describing it as a creature of the Norwegian Sea. This is remarkable. The man who created the system by which all living things are still named and classified took the Kraken seriously enough to include it in his formal taxonomy of known creatures. He later removed it in subsequent editions, possibly under pressure from colleagues who considered its inclusion an embarrassment. But the fact that it was ever there at all tells us something important about how the Kraken was perceived by serious naturalists of the 18th century. It was not to them clearly in the category of pure myth. It occupied the same uncertain territory as the platypus, as the giant tortoise, as dozens of other creatures that were reported by travelers and sailors and that naturalists had not yet personally examined. The Danish naturalist Johan Reinhold Forster, who sailed with Captain James Cook on his second voyage of exploration, documented observations of large unknown sea creatures in the southern Pacific and Atlantic that he could not classify. Cook's own journals contain references to enormous tentacled creatures observed at depth. The naturalists of the great age of exploration were not dismissing these encounters. They were collecting them, uncertain of their significance, but aware that the ocean contained unknown biology of extraordinary scope. The turning point came in 1873 on the coast of Newfoundland. Two fishermen named Daniel Squires and Theophilus Pico were out in a small boat near Portugal Cove when they came upon a large floating object they initially took for wreckage. One of them struck it with a boathook. The object moved. Two enormous arms came out of the water and reached for the boat. What followed was a fight for survival. The men paddled desperately away. One of the arms came over the gunwale of the boat. A young boy named Tom Picot, 12 years old, who was aboard the boat, took a hatchet and cut through the arm. The creature retreated. The men made it to shore. They brought the severed arm with them. The arm measured 19 feet. It was taken to Reverend Moses Harvey of St. John's, a clergyman and amateur naturalist who had been collecting reports of large sea creatures from Newfoundland fishermen for years. Harvey recognized immediately that the arm was the limb of a giant squid of unprecedented size. He had it photographed and sent descriptions to the scientific community in Britain and North America. What followed over the next decade was extraordinary. The Newfoundland coast, sitting above some of the deepest water in the North Atlantic, proved to be the site of multiple giant squid strandings and encounters in the 1870s. Reverend Harvey collected specimens. Scientists finally had physical evidence. The giant squid, Architeuthis ducks, was formally described as a species based on this material. The creature that sailors had been describing for centuries was real. It was not the size of an island. It was not capable of pulling a full sailing ship under. But it was enormous by any standard, and it was real, and it had been there all along. The best evidence for the true scale of giant squid did not come from the animals themselves, but from their predators. Sperm whales, the largest toothed predators on Earth, feed almost exclusively on large squid. The stomach contents of harvested sperm whales, documented extensively during the Great Whaling Era and analyzed by biologists in the 20th century, told a story of prey animals that dwarfed anything yet captured or washed ashore. The beaks of squid are made of hard chitin and survive digestion almost intact. Sperm whale stomachs regularly contain beaks that, based on the relationship between beak size and body size in known specimens, corresponded to animals with mantles of 3 meters and total lengths that could approach 15 to 18 meters. Some beaks found in sperm whale stomachs corresponded to animals even larger, though the precise scaling calculations are debated among researchers. Sperm whales themselves bear the evidence of these encounters on their bodies. Bull sperm whales are frequently found with circular scars on their skin, caused by the suckers of giant squid. These suckers in large adult squid are lined with sharp teeth-like serrations that leave distinctive round marks. The size of some of these scar formations on large bulls is consistent with squid of extraordinary dimensions, animals that were fighting back against the whale, trying to eat them rather than simply being consumed. The battle between sperm whale and giant squid in the deep ocean, one of the most dramatic predator-prey interactions on Earth, has never been directly observed by humans. It takes place hundreds of meters below the surface, in total darkness, in water cold enough to stop a human being's heart in minutes. The giant squid is not the largest cephalopod that exists. That distinction belongs to the colossal squid, Mesonocotuthis hamiltoni, first described scientifically in 1925 from 2 tentacles found in a sperm whale's stomach. For decades, the colossal squid was known only from fragments. Full specimens were essentially impossible to obtain because the animal lives in the Southern Ocean, circling Antarctica, at depths that made sampling extremely difficult. In 2007, a New Zealand fishing vessel operating in the Ross Sea caught the largest colossal squid specimen ever recorded. The animal measured approximately 10 meters in length and weighed 495 kilograms. It was brought to New Zealand and is now preserved at Te Papa Tongarewa, the Museum of New Zealand. It is the largest invertebrate specimen in any museum on Earth. The colossal squid is different from the giant squid in ways that matter for understanding the Kraken legend. Where the giant squid is built for speed and active hunting, the colossal squid is more of an ambush predator with a different body plan and, crucially, a different arrangement of weapons on its tentacles. The suckers of a colossal squid are not serrated rings. They are rotating hooks, sharp and curved, capable of locking into flesh. An animal of this design, at maximum adult size, attacking a wooden boat out of predatory confusion or defensive aggression would cause damage that surviving sailors could not explain in terms of any animal they knew. The current maximum confirmed size of the colossal squid is around 10 to 14 meters. But researchers studying the biology of these animals have consistently noted that the largest individuals found have been juveniles or subadults, not full-grown. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface. 95% of it has never been directly explored by human beings. The deep ocean, below 200 meters, is the largest habitat on Earth and also the least understood. The creatures living in it have been sampled through trawling, through occasional captures of stranded or dying individuals, and through the evidence left in the bodies and stomach contents of animals that humans do hunt, particularly the great whales. This sampling is extraordinarily incomplete. Deep-sea exploration in the past 30 years has repeatedly produced the discovery of large animals that were previously unknown or previously thought to be extremely rare. The giant oarfish, which can reach lengths of 8 meters and which was historically associated with sea serpent legends, has been filmed alive for the first time only in recent decades. The megamouth shark, a filter-feeding shark reaching lengths of 5 meters, was not known to science until 1976. The Dumbo octopus, living at depths of 3,000 to 4,000 meters, was not documented until remotely operated vehicles reached those depths systematically. What lives below 1,000 meters in the most productive deep ocean regions, the North Atlantic, the Antarctic circumpolar waters, the waters above the mid-ocean ridges, is not fully known. The Kraken, as described, a creature large enough to be mistaken for land, is biologically implausible at any known or estimated scale of cephalopod growth. But the biological implausibility of a very large animal living in a virtually unexplored environment is not the same as the impossibility. It is simply a statement that we have not found it yet. The giant squid was biologically implausible until the 1870s. Beyond the question of what the Kraken actually was, there is a more immediate question for the history of piracy and maritime culture. How did the fear of the Kraken shape the behavior of the men who sailed? The answer is that it shaped it profoundly and practically. Charts of the deep Atlantic and Norwegian waters in the 16th and 17th centuries frequently included warnings about sea monsters in particular regions. These warnings were not merely decorative. They were practical information passed from one generation of sailors to the next about areas where anomalous encounters had been reported. A prudent captain who saw such a warning on a chart would know that other sailors had observed something in that area worth avoiding. The effect of Kraken-type fears on routing decisions was real. Some shipping routes avoided areas of deep water where encounters had been reported, adding days to voyages in preference to transiting waters that had produced frightening stories. The Sargasso Sea, that eerily calm patch of the central Atlantic, whose floating seaweed was associated in sailor mythology with trapped ships and unknown horrors, was avoided by cautious navigators for reasons that were partly rational and partly driven by accumulated fear. For pirates specifically, the Kraken occupied a particular place in their psychological world. A pirate crew operated in a state of existential fear that was multidimensional: fear of naval pursuit, fear of weather, fear of hostile coastlines, fear of disease, fear of mutiny, and underlying all of it, the fear of the sea itself. The Kraken, whether believed literally or metaphorically, externalized the terror of the deep ocean into an image that men could share and discuss and build a common language around. The final truth about the Kraken is that it was never entirely wrong. The specific claims were wrong. It is not large enough to be an island. It does not create whirlpools that sink ships. It does not lie dormant on the ocean floor waiting to rise. But the underlying claim that the deep ocean contains creatures of extraordinary size and strangeness that human beings had not categorized or even imagined was entirely correct. The giant squid confirmed it. The colossal squid extended it. The deep-sea fauna documented by remotely operated vehicles over the past 40 years extends it further still. The ocean floor beneath the waters where pirate ships sailed is home to animals that no pirate ever saw, and no natural historian of the age could have predicted. Bioluminescent creatures, creatures with body plans unlike anything in the shallow ocean, creatures that communicate through light, creatures that can survive pressure that would crush a submarine, creatures whose intelligence and sensory capability rival or exceed those of the animals that humans have traditionally categorized as intelligent. The giant squid has finally been photographed in its natural deep ocean environment for the first time in 2004 by Japanese researchers Tsunemi Kubodera and Kyoichi Mori. The photograph showed an animal that was actively hunting at depth, alert, purposeful, and entirely unlike the passive blob that washed-up specimens had suggested. In 2012, a giant squid was filmed alive in deep water for the first time. The footage showed something that the sailors who described the Kraken would have recognized immediately. A creature of enormous size, moving through the darkness with absolute confidence, completely at home in a world that human beings could barely reach and could not survive in. The Kraken was never just a monster. It was the ocean telling sailors the truth about itself, that the deep was infinite, unknowable, and full of things that defied every category they had. The giant squid proved it real. The ocean floor proved it plausible. Every ship that vanished without explanation left one question open: what actually rose from below?